Have you ever wondered, what if the reason you haven't found the right person has nothing to do with being prettier, younger, or better at making other people happy? What if it begins the moment you stop chasing approval and finally learn to smile at the person looking back at you in the mirror? Some people spend years searching for someone who will love them, only to forget that the very first person they need to love is themselves. Today's story begins with a marriage falling apart, but this isn't really a story about betrayal, and it isn't a story about divorce. It's the story of a woman who slowly lost herself over the years and the quiet journey that led her back home. Mariana is 47 years old. She works in sales for a company that supplies bathroom and plumbing fixtures. It's not the kind of job that turns heads, but she's been doing it for nearly 20 years, and she's always taken pride in the life she's built through hard work and dedication. Mariana is also the mother of 2 sons. They've grown into kind, responsible young men, and they remain the greatest source of joy in her life. From the outside, most people would have said she was lucky. She had a stable career, a loving family, and a cozy home in a peaceful neighborhood where neighbors still smiled and greeted one another every morning. For a long time, Mariana believed that too, until a new neighbor moved into the house just a few doors away. No one in the neighborhood knew much about her. People only knew that her husband had died in a car accident about 5 years earlier. Since then, she had been running the small moving company they had built together. She wasn't the kind of woman who immediately caught everyone's attention. She wasn't especially glamorous, but there was something quietly graceful about her. She had a slender figure, a gentle voice, and a calm presence that made people feel at ease. When she began renovating her new home, she became one of Mariana's customers. Their conversations were always about work, bathroom fixtures, delivery schedules, installation dates. Nothing more, nothing less. Mariana never imagined that those brief, ordinary conversations would one day become the beginning of an entirely different chapter in her life. For the first few months after the new neighbor moved in, life in the neighborhood carried on, as it always had. Every now and then, Mariana would see her while walking to her car in the morning. Sometimes they crossed paths in the late afternoon, exchanging nothing more than a warm smile and a simple hello. Mariana knew very little about her. She had heard that the woman's husband had died in a tragic car accident about 5 years earlier. Since then, she had been running the small moving company they had built together. It couldn't have been an easy life. Perhaps that was why Mariana always felt a quiet sense of compassion whenever they met. When the woman began renovating her new home, Mariana's company supplied the bathroom fixtures. They met a handful of times. They talked about sinks, faucets, tile colors, and installation schedules. Every conversation stayed within the boundaries of work, nothing personal, nothing that hinted at what was still to come. Months passed. Life settled back into its familiar rhythm. Mariana went to work every morning. Dinner was shared at home each evening. Her 2 sons came by on weekends, whenever their schedules allowed. There weren't many grand romantic moments left in her marriage, but she had come to believe that peace was sometimes more precious than passion. Then one ordinary day, a day she would replay in her mind countless times afterward. She often wondered if she hadn't forgotten that report at home, Would her life have taken a different path? That morning had been unusually busy. Just before noon, Mariana realized an important report was still sitting on the desk in her home office. She apologized to her manager and drove home to retrieve it. The streets were as familiar as ever. As she passed the moving company's office, she noticed something unusual. The front door was closed. That was strange. It was the middle of a workday. Without thinking much about it, she kept driving. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw a man slip through the side entrance. Her hands tightened around the steering wheel. The way he walked, the jacket he was wearing, even the small habit of adjusting his sleeve before opening the door. Every detail was painfully familiar. It was her husband. She didn't get out of the car. She didn't walk across the street. Instead, she quietly pulled over on the opposite side and sat there in silence. Her mind searched desperately for another explanation. Maybe he was helping with a delivery. Maybe the business needed some repair work. Maybe this was all just a misunderstanding. She reached for her phone and called him. Across the street, she watched him stop. He took his phone out of his pocket, looked at the screen. There was no doubt he knew it was her. For a brief moment, she thought he would answer. Instead, he locked the screen, slipped the phone back into his pocket, and disappeared inside the building. About 5 minutes later, her phone rang. It was him. His voice sounded calm, completely ordinary. "I'm in a meeting right now, so I couldn't answer. Is everything okay?" Mariana looked at the same closed door across the street. She took a slow breath, then answered as gently as she could, "It's nothing important. I was going to ask if you could stop by the house and grab a report for me if you were nearby. But don't worry, I'll just go get it myself." There was a brief silence on the other end. Then he simply told her to drive safely before ending the call. Mariana lowered her phone. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't run across the street demanding answers. She simply started her car and drove home. For the first time in 23 years of marriage, she realized a heart could become so heavy that even breathing felt difficult. Over the next few weeks, Mariana didn't confront him right away. She chose to watch, not because she wanted evidence to accuse anyone, but because she was terrified of being wrong. Yet the calmer she remained, the clearer the truth became. One evening, after several long conversations that could no longer avoid reality, they sat down together. There were no dramatic arguments, no shouting, no accusations. Only two people who finally accepted that their marriage had reached its end. Their two sons were already grown. Mariana refused to let them become casualties of endless fights between their parents. She never wanted them to feel they had to choose between their mother and their father. So they chose a different path. They divorced quietly, respectfully, with gratitude for the years they had once shared. On the day she signed the divorce papers, Mariana realized something that hurt far more than losing her husband. For the first time in her life, she truly believed that perhaps she was no longer a woman worth choosing. For the first few months after the divorce, Mariana moved through life like a clock that still kept perfect time, even though something essential inside had stopped working. Every morning she woke up at the same hour. She made breakfast. She drove to work. She greeted her coworkers with the same gentle smile. She answered customers' questions with the same calm voice they had always known. No one at the office noticed anything had changed. But every time she walked past the mirror in the ladies' room, she would pause, not to fix her hair, not to touch up her makeup, just to stare at her own reflection and silently ask herself, what did this woman do wrong? The question followed her everywhere, while driving home, while cooking dinner, while lying awake long after midnight. Surprisingly, she didn't spend much time thinking about her ex-husband anymore. The image that haunted her instead was the woman next door, her graceful figure, her quiet voice, the effortless kindness she carried wherever she went. Without realizing it, Mariana had placed the two of them on opposite sides of an invisible scale. Maybe she was younger, maybe she was more feminine, maybe she knew how to make a man feel seen in ways Mariana no longer could. Or maybe, after all those years, Mariana had simply become too ordinary. That thought settled deep inside her heart, and from that day on, she became determined to change. It started with a new hairstyle, then came new clothes, a gym membership, a stricter diet, skincare routines. Every month, she promised herself the same thing. If I can become just a little prettier, I won't hurt like this anymore. But the pain never disappeared. It only changed its shape. Whenever she saw a younger woman, she felt she wasn't enough. Whenever she saw an older couple holding hands, she wondered if anyone could ever truly fall in love with a woman approaching 50. One afternoon, a close friend invited her to a social gathering for people who had gone through divorce. After hesitating for days, Mariana finally agreed. She spent nearly 2 hours getting ready. She chose the most elegant dress she owned. She styled her hair. She practiced smiling in front of the mirror. She wanted to look confident, wanted to look interesting, wanted to look like someone worth noticing. But throughout the evening, something felt painfully wrong. She laughed a little louder than she normally would. She talked about things she thought other people wanted to hear. She hid the simple hobbies she genuinely loved because they suddenly seemed too boring. When she finally returned home, the most exhausting part of the evening wasn't the high heels. It was pretending to be someone she wasn't. Over the following months, she went on a few more dates. One man cared only about appearances. Another was still emotionally trapped in his previous marriage. Someone else seemed wonderful until he quietly disappeared after only a handful of conversations. Each disappointment felt like another piece of evidence. Maybe she still wasn't enough. Maybe she needed to try harder. Maybe becoming lovable required becoming someone else. Then one quiet autumn evening, while cleaning out an old cabinet before repainting her bedroom, Mariana accidentally knocked a small storage box onto the floor. Photographs spilled across the room. Pictures from college, her first day at work, a family vacation from years ago. Then, one photograph made her stop breathing for a moment. She was about 25, wearing a simple white blouse, no expensive jewelry, no designer clothes, barely any makeup. Yet her smile seemed brighter than anything else in the picture. Mariana sat on the floor for a very long time. She couldn't stop looking at that younger version of herself. Finally, she reached out and gently touched the photograph. One question quietly rose inside her heart. When did I lose her? Not after the divorce. Not the day she discovered the affair. Long before that, she had lost herself little by little. Every time she placed everyone else's happiness before her own. Every time she believed being a good wife meant sacrificing everything. Every birthday she carefully planned for her husband. every celebration she organized for her children. While forgetting that she once had dreams of her own, tears finally came, not because she missed the man who had left, but because she missed the woman she had quietly abandoned. That night, for the first time in months, she stopped asking, "Why wasn't I enough for him?" Instead, she asked something entirely different. When was the last time I truly lived for myself? The next morning, Mariana didn't sign up for another beauty treatment. She didn't download another dating app. She didn't search online for advice about how to keep a man's attention. Instead, after work, she walked into a small bookstore. She bought a novel she had wanted to read years earlier, back when she always told herself she didn't have enough time. The following morning, instead of sleeping an extra 30 minutes, she took a slow walk through the park. That weekend, she bought a few flowering plants for the front porch. A month later, she enrolled in a watercolor class for beginners, not because she wanted to impress anyone, but because she realized there were still so many things she had never done, simply because they brought her joy. Nothing changed overnight. Healing rarely does. But little by little, Mariana found herself smiling more often, not because someone new had entered her life, but because each day she rediscovered another small piece of the woman in that old photograph. And for the first time in many years, she stopped waking up, wondering, "What can I do to make someone love me?" Instead, she opened her eyes each morning with a gentler question. "What can I do today that will make me smile?" Spring arrived quietly the following year. The flowers on Mariana's front porch began to bloom. There weren't many of them, just a handful of small blossoms. Yet every morning before leaving for work, she would pause for a moment to admire them. Life still wasn't extraordinary. She still went to the same office. She still smiled at the same coworkers. Her sons still came home whenever they could. She still attended her watercolor class on weekends. Sometimes she stayed up late with a good novel. Sometimes she drove to a nearby town just to enjoy a cup of coffee and watch strangers pass by. Most of her days were wonderfully ordinary, and for the first time in years, Mariana realized she was no longer afraid of ordinary days, because somewhere along the way, ordinary had become peaceful. One Saturday afternoon, after returning a novel to her favorite bookstore, she wandered through the literature section looking for something new to read. She reached for a book on the top shelf. At that exact moment, another hand reached for the very same book. They both laughed. The gentleman immediately pulled his hand back. "I think the book is having trouble deciding who it wants to go home with." Mariana smiled. A real smile, not the one she had practiced in front of a mirror months earlier. Just an honest, effortless smile. They talked for only a few minutes, mostly about books. Before leaving, the man turned back. "If you finish it before I do, I hope you'll tell me whether it's worth reading." He handed her his business card. He didn't ask for her phone number. He didn't try to impress her. He simply wished her a wonderful afternoon and walked away. Mariana slipped the card inside the novel and forgot about it. A few weeks later, they met again at the same bookstore. This time, they shared a cup of coffee. Their conversations weren't filled with dramatic stories. They talked about favorite authors, travel, gardening, the quiet beauty of getting older, the joy of cooking for people you love, the strange comfort of rainy afternoons. No one tried to sound more successful than they really were. No one tried to hide the parts of life that hadn't gone according to plan. Mariana noticed something she hadn't felt in a very long time. She wasn't trying to make someone like her. She wasn't carefully choosing every word. She wasn't pretending to enjoy things she didn't enjoy. She simply felt safe enough to be herself. She told him about the watercolor paintings she was still embarrassed to show anyone. He laughed and confessed that he had burned the very first loaf of bread he ever tried to bake. Neither of them was trying to appear perfect. And perhaps that was exactly why being together felt so easy. Their relationship grew slowly. There were no grand promises, no extravagant gifts, no desperate attempts to fill the emptiness left by the past. There was simply kindness, respect, patience, and the quiet confidence that neither of them needed saving. One evening, while walking beneath a row of old maple trees, the man suddenly asked, "Can I tell you something?" Mariana nodded. "Do you know what made me notice you the very first time?" She smiled. "Was it because I was holding too many books?" He chuckled. "No. The flowers on my porch." He shook his head again. "No." He looked at her for a moment before speaking. "It was the way you seemed at peace. Not because your life was perfect, not because someone was standing beside you, but because you genuinely seemed to enjoy your own life." I remember thinking, anyone who has learned to love the life they already have will probably know how to love another person with honesty instead of fear. Mariana stood quietly. A soft breeze moved through the trees. For a brief moment, she saw herself as she had been a year earlier, sitting in her car across the street, watching her husband walk into another woman's building, certain that her life had ended. If someone had told her that day, that 1 year later, she would be smiling like this, she never would have believed it. But now she understood something she hadn't understood back then. The man walking beside her had not come into her life to rescue her from loneliness. He hadn't arrived to heal the wounds left by her past. Those things she had already begun doing for herself. He simply arrived after there was finally room in her heart for a healthy kind of love. Maybe many of us grow up believing that everything will change the day we meet the right person. But perhaps life works the other way around. Perhaps everything begins to change the day we stop asking someone else to prove that we're worthy of love. The day we stop exhausting ourselves trying to become the version of us we think other people will choose. The day we begin treating ourselves with the same kindness we've spent years giving everyone else, because something beautiful happens then. Not only do we find peace, we also become capable of recognizing the kind of love that doesn't ask us to become someone else. Real love doesn't grow from desperation. It grows where self-respect already lives. And maybe, just maybe, the right person doesn't find you while you're desperately searching for them. They find you when you finally found yourself. So if you're walking through heartbreak today, if you've been betrayed, if someone made you question your worth, please don't let this chapter convince you that you are difficult to love. Sometimes, what feels like an ending is simply life making room for you to meet yourself again. And when that day comes, when you wake up genuinely grateful for the life you've built, you may discover that love arrives quietly, without being chased. If Mariana's story brought a little peace to your heart today, please consider liking this video and sharing it with someone who might need these words. And if you'd like to hear more gentle stories about healing, hope, and finding yourself again, we'd love to welcome you back to the peaceful chapter. Until next time, be kind to yourself, because perhaps that's where every beautiful beginning truly starts.